The sun is shining, right?
Oh
We're
yeah.
breathing in and out.
True.
Maybe we had breakfast, yeah, or tea or coffee. Um, and the earth is humming along. How amazing. The earth is 4.5 billion years old. 4.5 billion years old and still ticking, still turning over, still rotating, revolving, moving about the sun 66,000 miles an hour, turning over 1,200 miles an hour, so that we have night and day. How amazing is that?
It's great.
We we follow a star moving around the Milky Way galaxy. Our star has been burning for 5 billion years almost, and the galaxy is some 14 billion years old. So we are sort of newcomers in the cosmic scheme, having arrived in the last third of the age of the universe. It has been speculated that many civilizations on other planets have come and gone in that 14 billion years. What do you think?
Yeah, no great idea. Then. That's great.
We don't have much idea today because we seem not to be able to contact other societies living out in the Milky Way. But this is very difficult because our technologies might not work. Our technologies are maybe too primitive to be able to discern the signals from other societies living in the Milky Way galaxy. We we know now that there are many, many planets hovering about other stars in our galaxy. There are at least 200 billion stars, which is, how do you understand that kind of number, 200 billion? 200 billion stars and countless planets moving about those stars. And we speculate that life has arisen on those stars. What do you think?
Wonderful.
Is that possible?
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. There is general agreement among most people that life is possible on other planets, especially if they are located within the certain distance from their suns, their stars, so it's not too hot, not too cold, and they may have an atmosphere like we have. They may have water like we have. Water seems to be abundant in the universe. If you look out into space with a good telescope, and I mean an observatory type telescope, you can see the signatures of water existing as ice crystals out in space. How incredible is that? The presence of water means that life could be possible on other worlds. So that's encouraging. The universe produces life. How does it produce life? We don't really know. We don't know how life began, whether it began on Earth or began somewhere else and was brought to Earth, maybe in a meteor. There is a meteor that we found in Australia a few years ago that seems to have the traces of life embedded in it. That's pretty amazing. So at this time, we still do not know how life began on the earth, but we do know that it began fairly early, almost 4 billion years ago, out of the 4.5 billion years that the earth has been here. And that life covered the oceans and anywhere there was water, but was mostly bacterial life, right? Simple forms of life made out of the stuff of the universe. One of the big indications that life is prevalent in the universe is that it is made out of the ordinary things of the universe. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. Hi, come on in, come on in. Yeah, you. Is that Wayne?
It's Wayne. I have to go for a walk.
Oh, okay. Maybe
I
when
love
you finish your walk, you could join us.
Okie dokie.
All right. So life is, when we examine life today, we find it's made out of the ordinary stuff of the universe. Hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur. The most common atoms in the universe also happen to make life. How amazing is that? And each of those common atoms, which I just mentioned, and there's a few more, but each of those common atoms plays a particular role in the formation of life. And it's so that hydrogen, for example, forms certain bonds that can be broken or put together in an easy way, and that enables our DNA to exist. It enables the process of reproduction to go forward. When the DNA strands, which are two strands of information, can split apart to form two new strands in the new life that comes forward. I know that's a little complicated to picture, but without the ways that atoms work, life would not be possible. And that's very extraordinary, I think. We see the surface of things. We see the large forms of things, people, birds, animals, trees, the sky, the rocks. We see all those forms, but underneath those forms are a mysterious realm of protons and neutrons and electrons, all actively engaged to create the world that we experience. It's very extraordinary. We have a world hidden from us that is responsible for everything that we know. 2,500 years ago in Greece, a fellow by the name of Democritus said that there were only atoms and the void. The world was made of atoms. The air we breathe, the ground under our feet, all the animals and plants are simply expressions of atoms. Pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. He was right about the atoms being the building blocks of the universe. He thought, however, that atoms could not be taken apart or cut apart, which is actually the word atom in Greek means uncuttable. And Democritus thought atoms couldn't be taken apart, but today we know that atoms can be taken apart, and they are actually made of many different parts. It's amazing that human beings can take apart an atom, don't you think? I mean, how is that possible? And yet we are able to probe the smallest of things with our machines that we've devised in the past 100 years or so. And we've learned a lot about the fundamental nature of reality, or the underlying reality. The world and the universe is a great mystery. One of the most important questions that people have asked down through the ages has been, why is there something rather than nothing? Why is there something rather than nothing? That's a great question to which we have no answer. Do you have an answer anyway? You might have an answer. It's a wonderful question, isn't it?
Yeah, it's better to have something than nothing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. There seems to be a what they call a conundrum. A conundrum is a proposition in which there is no clear answer. For example, in our world, things seem to exist in nothingness. Planets and stars exist in space, unending space which surrounds all the planets and stars. Was there ever a time when there were no planets and stars, and there was simply nothing? And if so, how did something arise out of that nothing? So, if the universe is 14 billion years old, that means that it had a beginning, and what came before that? How did the universe arise? Not only arise, but appear in the way it did, with the fundamental building blocks of hydrogen and oxygen and helium, right? It wasn't just a bunch of the universe didn't begin with something like only light or heat that dissipated out into space and disappeared forever. Something substantial occurred at the beginning of time, at the beginning of the universe, when we think the universe from a tiny point suddenly flared forth into the kind of world we know today. When I say the kind of world we know today, that means atoms and molecules. So the universe gave rise to something that was already complicated. In the first moments of time, hydrogen atoms and helium atoms were produced. Now, ordinarily, you would think if that's all there was, what would happen? What would happen? That you would think that that gas, hydrogen gas, which was the atoms, that that hydrogen would simply disappear into space. When you let out a tank of hydrogen gas in a room, it fills up the whole room and tries to go outside of the room. It tries to thin out as much as possible. And you would think that the hydrogen gas that was present in the early universe would do just that, and that's it. So we wouldn't be sitting here today if that was the case. But what happened was that the hydrogen gas, over time, and we're talking about millions of years, the hydrogen gas began to condense. It began to pull together under something we call gravity, which we still don't understand. But that gravity and the gas worked together to produce the first stars. The first stars came about. There were no planets like the Earth. There may have been a few planets like Jupiter, which is basically a frozen gas planet, or Saturn, or Neptune. Frozen gas planets are different from the Earth. They don't have the minerals we have. They don't have liquid water or even frozen water. Those early planets would be just like hydrogen gas, and that's it. But the stars, which were also made of hydrogen gas, did something interesting. As they burned the hydrogen gas to produce light and heat, they created heavier and heavier atoms. And this process ultimately led to the 92 atoms that we find around us today that make up the world, and especially the few atoms, the most common atoms, hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur. Those few atoms are able to form life. That's pretty amazing, don't you think? So we come to the question, is the universe designed or somehow structured to create life? That's quite a question. Is life part and parcel of the universe? Does the universe have a purpose? Many scientists today will say there is no purpose to the universe, it simply is, and it happens to produce life, which is a kind of byproduct of the actions of atoms, but we don't see that it has a purpose. That idea is countered by many philosophers and religious people who believe that purpose is a fundamental part of the universe, and that we are here because the universe has value and purpose. and strives to create and strives to produce consciousness and life and the wonder of existence that can be perceived by conscious life. Consciousness is one of the interesting products of the universe. Now, for a long time, people have believed that consciousness is specific to human beings, and consciousness is not found in other animals or even inanimate objects such as rocks or water. What do you think? Is it possible that consciousness could be part of water or rocks? That's an interesting question, no? I'm not saying a rock thinks, but is it possible a rock has some sort of experience? What do we know of the atoms that are holding that rock together, that are interacting in every moment to create that rock, and are full of activity? That rock, which looks to us as a dead, inert thing, is actually on the atomic level full of activity. So is it possible that on some level that rock has a certain atomic experience of life? Well, not of life, but of being. When we look at water, water is made of molecules of hydrogen and oxygen that are bouncing off each other, grabbing hold of each other and letting go, grabbing hold, letting go. And that's what makes water wet and fluid. This constant grabbing on and letting go that these atoms, these molecules, I should say, perform over and over again, millions or even billions of times a second. And so water is full of activity, even when it's resting, even when it's in a glass, just sitting there, full of activity. Einstein, in 1905, I believe it was, wrote a paper on how at the surface of water you could see dust particles being moved about, and he said that was the result of molecules, the activity of molecules, which was a big proof of the existence of atoms. We didn't really know atoms existed, even though we've had 2,500 years of discussions about atoms, not just in Greece, but also in India and other places. We've had 2,500 years of discussions about the reality of atoms, but that was heavily contested up to the 1900s. It was only in 1905 that Einstein produced a paper that reflected the reality of atoms. And since then, we've had many proofs of the existence of atoms, and scientists the world over accept the reality of their existence. So when we look at the world, when we look at a rock, a water, a plant, an animal, we are seeing the surface of things, and the world beneath, the atomic world beneath that surface is not apparent to us. What is it? I wanted to talk a little bit about the amazing world of animals today. I have an article here in this week's, what is this? This is Science Magazine, and this is one of the best magazines that reports science on a weekly basis. And I'm lucky enough to get this in the mail. And in this week's edition, we have a story about giraffes. Animals are so amazing. All life is incredibly amazing. And here are some new studies that talk about the particular adaptations that giraffes have to survive in their form. A giraffe can be 17 feet high. It's the tallest animal in the world. It's so tall that it can eat the leaves off trees where other animals find it difficult to reach. But that presents a problem because the giraffe, in order to get enough oxygen circulating through the body, it has to have a very high blood pressure. And the giraffe has a blood pressure about 2.5 times higher than we do. And scientists have wondered, how is it that they don't suffer from the problems of such a high blood pressure, such as heart problems and kidney problems, which would occur if they didn't have some sort of protection from that blood pressure. And now we've discovered that they have a certain gene which enables them to have this kind of blood pressure and not feel any ill effects. And if you take that gene, and this is amazing what we can do today, we can go into the microscopic parts of the cell and remove information and place that information from one animal to another and affect the new animal that has that now information. So they took a certain gene from the giraffe, which was related to protecting them from high blood pressure, and they put it in a mouse, and then they gave the mouse something that makes for high blood pressure, which would ordinarily damage the mouse, but it didn't, because the mouse now had this protective information that it got from a giraffe. How amazing is that? We live in a new age. We live in a world where new possibilities of even creating superior forms of life is now possible. But getting back to the giraffe, so the giraffe has 400 different genes that are unique to the giraffe, which probably means that it has the capacity to be very tall. It has the capacity to have very good eyesight. The giraffe has the best eyesight of any mammal in the world, which is pretty amazing. It has poor um, poor ability to smell. The giraffe cannot detect odors because um, it actually doesn't need that much in its lifestyle. It just has to be able to find leaves. So, well, I shouldn't speculate too much, but the giraffe doesn't have a particularly good sense of smell, but it has excellent vision. And let me see what else. Also, a strange thing about giraffes is they only sleep 40 minutes a day. That's unusual. And only 3 to 5 minutes at a time. So if you're a giraffe, life is almost 24 hours a day. You know, you're awake 24 hours a day. Pretty amazing, right? What are they doing in the dark? So anyway, that's this week's story about the giraffe, which is pretty interesting. Animals and plants are very amazing. You know, here's a book. Here's a book called What It's Like to Be a Bird. And this is written by David Allen Sibley, who is a noted bird authority, and he also did the beautiful drawings for the book. And you can see this drawing here, or paintings, I should say. He did the paintings for that book, and it's all full of very interesting stuff about the lives of birds and how birds have so many different wonderful adaptations that make it possible for them to live in the world. For example, the eyesight of hawks is, as most people know, it's excellent, better than ours. A hawk can see, say, a rabbit at a mile away that we couldn't see, hiding in the bush. You know, a hawk has twice the amount of light gathering apparatus in their eyes. The place that light is focused on is twice what we have, and probably results in 10 times the ability to see at distances. So there are all kinds of birds that use eyesight to find their prey. The hawks, of course, and eagles, and the flycatchers, the little birds like phoebes and willow flycatchers and scissortail flycatchers, birds you may have seen or heard of, and all these birds have very acute eyesight, and they are able to pick out, say, a moving fly or bee in the air, and be able to track that bee and catch it most of the time, or a good part of the time, and it's all because they have this wonderful eyesight, and they also have the ability to fly in very um, um, articulate ways. They're very good at maneuvering through the air, their bodies are built to be able to enable them to do all kinds of acrobatics in the air, and it's really a wonder as to how this all could have come about, and how the specific adaptations that each species of bird has. I mean, a bird like the pelican has this big, um, what do you call that? The bill with that scoop on it that can scoop up a lot of water and fish and get rid of the water and hold on to the fish. Um, Pretty amazing. And there are shorebirds that have these long pointed bills that actually have a flexible tip and can feel all sorts of pressures underneath the ground, underneath the sand. They can feel the pressure of water in their beaks, on their beaks. They know, for example, just by the presence of water next to a clam, that that water is going to feel more dense if it's next to a clam than not, and that's pretty amazing. Um, so animals and plants have incredible abilities to survive, and where do these abilities come from? It's every feather on a bird is said to be unique. Every feather is in its place, and every feather has a certain role to play. Feathers, by the way, were invented by dinosaurs, right? Feathers, the dinosaurs, we've talked about this a lot. The dinosaurs were the first animals to make feathers, and the early feathers were like down, and we think that enabled the dinosaurs to live in colder places, perhaps during ice ages, who knows. Later, those feathers turned into flight feathers and became wings. And the first birds were born out of the dinosaurs. And they still had teeth in their bills and claws on their wings. And but basically, they were birds. And the modern bird is thought of as a dinosaur by many scientists today. I don't know if most people feel that, or understand that, but it's in the science world, the dinosaur and the bird are thought of as the same. So life has this ability to adapt in incredible ways. The bodies of insects and the way that insects can survive and thrive under difficult conditions, the way that plants can survive droughts and hurricanes and all sorts of things. Where do these specific abilities come from? For years, science has said that it's simply accidents. It's simply when information changes in the genes by accident, and if it's a positive accident, if it leads to something good, it will be passed on to the next generation. But you have to have something that works. You have to have something that enables life to have the kind of specific adaptations to the world, as I think, as a potential in the genes. That there is a potential for life becoming and changing and adapting in ways that are specific to the world. And there was a scientist by the name of Lamarck who believed that, and he thought that when giraffes stretched up to the trees, they lengthened their necks, and that the next generation of giraffes would have longer necks. Well, a lot of scientists said that that wasn't the case. It was just some giraffes happened to have longer necks. And that was why they survived better. And so there's been a big controversy in biology for decades whether life moves by design or whether it is just haphazard. And this remains even today. But I think there is more and more evidence to say that life has a certain possibility that is inherent in the genetic makeup of all life that enables it to produce new inventions and new possibilities for survival. There's a little fish that swims around in the cold waters of near Antarctica, and its blood is white. It doesn't have hemoglobin in its blood. Its blood is a sort of antifreeze that enables the fish to live in ultra cold waters, barely above freezing. In fact, it's a little bit below freezing there, but it doesn't freeze because it has so much salt in it. But the fish is able to survive with a kind of hemoglobin that is colorless, and as I recall, and this is a very interesting way of making a living. So how did that ever come about? How did the eye of the eagle ever come about? There are hawks that have telescopic sight. How could that ever be just an accident? So, thank you. That's my mailman. He always tells me when a package has arrived. So, what is the universe? What is life? Is it just an accident? Or is there a grand design? Or both? Who knows? Who knows? Let me read a poem. Let's see what we can find here. This is a favorite poem of mine from this book called Devotions. Devotions by Mary Oliver, who's my favorite poet. This is called The Roses. All afternoon I have been walking over the dunes, hurrying from one thick raft of the wrinkled salt roses to another, leaning down close to their dark or pale petals, red as blood or white as snow. And now I am beginning to breathe slowly and evenly, the way a hunted animal breathes, finally, when it is galloped and galloped when it is wrung dry, but at last is far away, so the panic begins to drain from the chest and the wonderful legs and exhausted mind. O sweetness, pure and simple, may I join you? I lie down next to them on the sand, but to tell about what happens next, truly I need help. Will somebody or something please start to sing? Will somebody or something please start to sing? I think that's wonderful. Does anything grab you in that poem? Mary Oliver, who passed away a couple of years ago at the age of 83, she wrote for her extensively on nature and her relationship to nature, which she felt a sense of reverence for nature. Um, for its wonder and its mystery. Here's a poem called Daisies. It is possible, I suppose, that sometime we will learn everything there is to learn. What the world is, for example, and what it means. I think this as I am crossing from one field to another in summer, and the mockingbird is mocking me as one who either knows enough already or knows enough to be perfectly content not knowing. Song being born of quest, he knows this. He must turn silent were he suddenly assaulted with answers. Instead, oh, I hear his wild, caustic, tender warbling ceaselessly unanswered. At my feet, the white petaled daisies display the small suns of their centerpiece. Their, if you don't mind me saying so, their hearts. Of course, I could be wrong. Perhaps their hearts are pale and narrow and hidden in the roots. What do I know? But this is a heaven itself, to take what is given, to see what is plain, what the sun lights up willingly. For example, I think this as I reach down, not to pick but merely to touch the suitability of the field for the daisies and the daisies for the field. Amazing, right? The suitability of the daisies for the field and the field for the daisies. Hmm. Any questions or answers or comments? Is the world beyond answer? Are there questions we haven't even thought of? St. Francis thought the universe was like kindred spirits. He called the sun brother sun and the moon sister moon. He reveled with the wonder of animals. To him, the world was a magical place. where everything was a sacred expression of God. In Hinduism, we have the same idea, the idea that the universe and God are not different, that everything in the universe is God, and there is nothing else but God. Is the entire universe a form of intelligence, a form of life, perhaps? A new question people are asking today is the universe alive in some sense? Is it just an accident that the universe has evolved like life? That we went from gas to stars to planets, from light elements to heavy elements, elements that make up life. That we went from bacteria to animals and plants, and that took 2 billion years. But nature isn't concerned much with time, I think, as we are, and does her work quietly and patiently and produces what it produces. So the question of is the universe alive, I think is a very valid question. It is a question of how we understand life. The universe is full of activity, full of atoms, molecules, fields of energy. And somehow this universe produces life and consciousness. In the 1900s, or I should say the late 1800s, the question of can life come about spontaneously? For a long time, we humans thought that life could come about spontaneously from non-living things like rags in closets and logs on the bottom of rivers. The rags could become mice and the logs could become alligators. People believed that for a long time, but finally Pasteur, with a series of experiments, showed that life could only come from life. And then scientists made a big division between the living and the non-living world. But I think we have to question that today. I think we have to look at the non-living world as full of activity. The world of atoms and molecules is not some inert and passive thing. It is actively engaging, and in an atom you have the electrons, and they're whirling about the nucleus at 1 or 2% the speed of light, and the nucleus is made of little particles that are swirling around each other, and everything is mostly empty space, and yet you have this atom which is substantial and that has mostly nothing to it, but it has a great deal of activity. what is the universe, and what is life, and what is mind. What's that? Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not able to hear you on my this. Let me jack up the sound here. Try again. All right. Um, I'm sorry, I can't hear you on my machine. Um, but um, we have with us this universe that stands before us and supports us in each moment. The air we breathe, made of life itself, the oxygen. What's happening? Hi, Wayne. The oxygen in the air was made by life, was created by plants. The plants are in harmony with the sun, the waters, the ground. Everything is moving together in the universe. Everything is part of everything else. How incredible is that? Maybe I'll read one more poem and we'll call it a day. Let's see what we have here. This is a poem written by Dao Yuan Ming. Two drinking songs. I built my hut near where people live, and yet I hear no traffic or noise or sound of wheels. Could you tell me what is happening? An aloneness gathers around the soul that is alone. I pick chrysanthemums under the east hedge. The mountains to the south are clear. The mountain air at sunset is so wonderful, and the birds coming home, one after the other. In all these details, there are secret truths, but when I try to shift the language, it all slips away. So strong a color on the late chrysanthemums, the stalk sways stoutly, flower wet with dew open, wandering drunk in this beauty. Who cares about my sorrows? I have left excitement behind, and what is not done, and what is not done. When the sun goes down, all bustle stops, and the birds on their return call from the leaves. I walk around my study, shouting and proud, because I can take up this life again. In each moment of life, the breath is moving in and out, and we are here, and we are alive, and that is a wonder. Thank you all for being such good listeners and questioners today. Thank you for listening so well. I hope you enjoyed the class, and I hope to see you again next week. Take care. Be well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye bye.